A gentle drizzle fell outside the sprawling Victorian house on Maple Street, where rumors of a mysterious writer had circulated for years. The locals claimed he was a genius, holed up in his home with stacks of unpublished manuscripts. Nobody ever saw him in the bakery or the park, nor did they catch more than a fleeting glimpse of him through an upstairs window. The layers of ivy clinging to his front porch hinted at how long it had been since he ventured out. Yet, curiosity about his absence had lessened over time. People assumed he preferred solitude. However, a hush fell across town one late summer day when paper invitations appeared in the mailboxes of a handful of local teens, each bearing his meticulous calligraphy and requests for their presence at his home. None of them had ever stepped foot inside, and when the letter specified that the meeting was to craft a fantasy novel, excitement sparked like a bonfire in the close-knit community. After the initial disbelief wore off, they found themselves standing at the foot of those creaking porch steps, brimming with both nerves and anticipation. For many, this invitation promised to transform a dull summer into something extraordinary. Inside, the living room felt cozy and time-worn. Soft cream-colored walls were lined with mahogany bookshelves that groaned under the weight of thick tomes, their spines faded from age. There was a faint scent of old paper, as if stories had seeped into the tapestry of the house itself. Tall windows allowed the rainy light to filter through, illuminating floating dust motes. The teensome wearing backpacks still heavy with last semester's textbooks found themselves greeted by the resident author at a round wooden table in front of a stone fireplace. He was older than they imagined, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed, and his posture straight if somewhat tentative. His voice was kind but weary as he introduced himself as Mr. Turner, quietly placing a pile of blank notebooks in the center of the table. He gauged their reactions carefully, as though uncertain how to embark on a journey of collaboration instead of solitary toil. Each of the teens carried a mixture of eagerness and insecurity on their faces, unsure whether they belonged in this reclusive writer's sanctuary. Seated around the table, they introduced themselves. There was Noah, known as the shy one who scribbled fantasy maps in the margins of his math notes. He could name every kingdom in his favorite game, but he'd never spoken about his passion out loud until that moment. Next to him was Fiona, who wore headphones every day to drown out the noise at home. She adored magical creatures and wrote secret poems about dragons she hid under her bed. Samantha, her eyes filled with quiet intensity, often seemed cautious about expressing her opinions, symbols of a family that expected her brilliance in everything. Eric, tall and sporty, had an unexpected penchant for epic sagas and heroic quests. And Tessa, timidly leaping through one of the blank notebooks, felt an undercurrent of excitement bubbling just beneath her serene exterior. Mr. Turner listened intently as they spoke, his own stare revealing curiosity about each one of them, as though searching for sparks of creativity he might coax into a flame. When introductions were complete, Mr. Turner offered a warm but slightly tremulous smile. "I've been working alone for so long," he began. I almost forgot that stories come to life through shared imagination. I've invited you here because I wish to step outside my own shadows. I've poured my heart into many manuscripts, but something is always missing. I suspect my stories might need more voices than my own. And I've heard that you're all brimming with ideas, even if you don't fully believe it yet. So, shall we fill these blank pages together? His voice carried a gentle intensity that made the teens lean forward, as if drawn by an invisible force. With a nod of unanimous agreement, they opened the notebooks. Sheets of crisp paper beckoned them to infinite possibilities, and a sense of camaraderie took root. Their first collaborative session began hesitantly. Noah stammered a bit as he started describing an enchanted forest, and Fiona squeaked out a mention of a phoenix with gilded feathers. Emboldening their efforts, Mr. Turner asked probing questions. Where would such a phoenix nest? What secrets does this forest hold? Samantha piped in, with a plot contrivance about a kingdom shrouded in eternal twilight thanks to a vengeful queen who stole the sun's essence. Eric, from the opposite side of the table, suggested that a ragtag group of adventurers set out to reclaim the stolen sunlight, propelled by a prophecy. The newly ignited synergy was palpable. Instead of Mr. Turner dominating the conversation, he merely guided them, encouraging them to expand or refine each idea. Soon, story threads wove themselves together in an intricate tapestry. As the session drew to a close, each teen left with a glowing excitement. It was no longer merely the somber man's home, it was now also their creative haven. By the time evening arrived on their second meeting, a transformation had already begun. Fiona brought sketches of the Phoenix Queen silhouette, a swirl of flame and grace. Noah arrived with a folded piece of paper depicting an elaborate map featuring coiling rivers and mountainous spires that soared into the clouds. Samantha had produced a short paragraph describing a prophecy inscribed on an ancient tapestry, and Eric had outlined a possible battle sequence complete with strategies for how the hero might outsmart enemy forces. Tessa, though quiet, had concocted the idea of a traveling minstrel who used haunting lullabies to soothe magical beasts. One by one, they shared their contributions, each building on the foundations of the others. Mr. Turner would occasionally interject with a well-timed suggestion, perhaps the prophecy must be cryptic, or the minstrel's lullaby needed a long-lost verse. He watched their eyes light up as if a door inside each of them had been unlocked. His living room began to change physically as well. Where once there was a single round table, Mr. Turner now rearranged the furniture to make space for comfortable floor cushions and small desks where the teens could spread out. Papers fluttered with rough sketches of kingdoms and scrawled paragraphs describing everything from the shape of armor to the color of an alchemist's potion. Warm lamps cast a glow into corners where teens huddled to refine new chapters. And they paused for a break. Mr. Turner offered hot chocolate, and the group collapsed in lively chatter discussing the newest cliffhanger. It felt magical in the most literal sense, as though the house itself thrummed with the energy of their collective creativity. And beneath that shared endeavor, each teen's sense of self-worth quietly grew. Word spread through the small town. Classmates whispered about what was happening at Mr. Turner's house, and some even asked for a chance to read preliminary drafts. Mr. Turner remained cautious. He wanted to protect the evolving story from uninformed criticism. However, the teens felt a surge of pride. For the first time, they were recognized not just as students or daydreamers, but as budding writers shaping their own fantasy epic. Families that seldom saw their children engage in anything beyond scrolling on their phones started to notice a profound shift. Fiona, who rarely spoke at the dinner table, now paused between mouthfuls of spaghetti just long enough to voice excitement about the Phoenix Queen's next scheme. Eric's mother was startled to see her son lost in a novel late into the night, actually reading about medieval battles for inspiration. Samantha's father, who always insisted on perfection, found himself softened by his daughter's fierce passion for turning a neglected storyline into something extraordinary. Intrigued, the parents encouraged them further, learning that Mr. Turner was not the reclusive eccentric they'd once believed, but rather a wise mentor unveiling gifts in their children that had long been hidden. As the novel grew, so did the character arcs within the real world. The teens realized that they had each yearned to be seen, to have their voices recognized. But their daily environments did little to nurture such a sensitive need. Mr. Turner's living room became a sanctuary from their anxieties. In that safe space, Tessa found the courage to voice new plot twists that had them all scribbling notes in eager frenzy. Noah's confidence blossomed so much that he extended beyond scribbling mythical maps and wrote a stirring monologue for one of the novel's main heroes, capturing the heartbreak of losing a loved one to dark magic. Fiona discovered her knack for describing intense visual imagery, conjuring entire vistas with her words. Samantha gained the bravery to revise segments that felt weak, often apologizing before she offered an edit, only to receive unanimous support for her suggestions. Eric, typically the one most comfortable in locker room banter, unearthed a tender side when crafting poems disguised as epic ballads, peppered throughout the tale. Mr. Turner, for his part, seemed as though he was coming alive again. Gone were the shadows in his eyes when he mused about manuscripts no publisher had seen. Replaced was a glimmer that spoke of renewed purpose. Once in a while, his voice quavered with the weight of secret regrets. He let slip stories of times he had attempted to collaborate but was rebuffed, times he had sent query letters into the void, wondering why his work was never quite right. Now, seeing the teens funnel their raw, unbridled creativity onto the pages, he felt a part of something that transcended each individual. He realized that he had always been missing a chorus of voices, or even an audience that believed in the worlds he built. What he found through these young collaborators was an affirmation that stories and hearts could flourish when nurtured by many. As the weeks turned to months, they approached a pivotal moment in their story. The heroes were about to face the Phoenix Queen in a grand final confrontation, one that would either restore the stolen sunlight or plunge the kingdom into a world of endless twilight. The teens heatedly debated the conclusion. Some yearned for a neat, triumphant ending, while others advocated for a bittersweet resolution that mirrored life's complexities. Mr. Turner, eager to test the group's collaborative strength, suggested that they split into small teams to draft alternative endings, then gather to decide which one resonated most. That night, the living room was awash in the soft scratching of pens, the crinkle of paper, and lively whispers. Each group shaped their ending with a distinct emotional tone. When they finally came together to discuss the results, the conversations were surprisingly charged. One group wanted a joyous celebration with glittering sunlight flooding every corner of the kingdom, while another believed an unresolved tension would serve as a cliffhanger for a potential sequel. Their voices sometimes overlapped in bursts of passion, but rather than fracturing, they discovered a compromise was possible. The queen would be defeated, yet a subtle darkness would remain, a hint that healing was a journey rather than a single act. The culminating day of writing arrived, a marathon session planned for a Saturday when no one had obligations. Mr. Turner pushed aside the living room furniture to create an impromptu workshop. Shuffling in with laptops, art supplies, and heaps of snacks, the teens prepared for one final creative sprint. By mid-afternoon, the last chapter was nearly complete. Their nerves shimmered whenever they read a particularly stirring paragraph or found the perfect line of dialogue. A hush would fall over them briefly, satisfaction surging through the group. Eric typed the epilogue, ensuring that the final lines merged each character's resolution with the carefully orchestrated sense of hope. Fiona layered in an earlier motif she'd introduced, a faint echo of the Phoenix Queen's voice, carried on the wind, reminding readers that nothing ever really vanishes. Noah added a note to clarify the cultural traditions of the forest people, while Samantha fussed over the exact phrasing of the closing sentence. Tessa, softly keeping track of each suggestion, assembled them into the cohesive final passage. And there it was, the group's completed fantasy novel, its final chapter shining with all the collaborative love that had nurtured it into existence. An eerie silence followed that last keystroke, quiet, yet brimming with promise. They all looked at one another, flushed with triumph and disbelief. Mr. Turner closed his eyes for a moment as though absorbing the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it!" Applause erupted spontaneously, followed by tears in more than one pair of eyes. They realized the novel wasn't just a neat story about heroes and queens. It was a reflection of their own transformation. The quiet ones had found courage. The uncertain ones had found purpose. Even Mr. Turner had found a reason to share his voice. They stayed late into the evening, reading segments out loud, giggling over jokes they'd embedded throughout, and marveling at how so many ideas fit together so seamlessly. By the time they turned out the lights, the house glowed with more than just lamps. It radiated the intangible warmth of stories waiting to be shared with the world. True to his resolve, Mr. Turner promised that this novel would see the light of day. He admitted he did not have a guaranteed publishing deal, but that he was no longer afraid to approach publishers. "No matter what," he told the teens, "this story lives in us, and that alone makes it worthwhile. But let's not stop here. Let's share it." Each teen received a printed draft of the full manuscript, a tangible testament to the collaboration. Their names graced the title page right alongside Mr. Turner's, a decision he insisted upon. In the weeks that followed, he prepared query letters, weaving into them the remarkable backstory, a group of everyday teenagers and a reclusive author uniting their imaginations in a quiet living room. At first, rejections trickled in familiar territory for Mr. Turner, yet he was no longer alone. and the group's morale never wavered. When a letter finally arrived from a small but enthusiastic publishing house, they gathered in the living room once more, ripping open the envelope with trembling fingers. The publisher praised the manuscript's boundless creativity, calling it a testament to the magic of shared storytelling. They wanted to sign it. Jubilation erupted. The teens scrawled colorful thank you notes to the publisher, and Mr. Turner took them all out for a small celebration at the local ice cream parlor, his first real public outing in ages. That evening, a wave of astonishment rippled through the parlor as longtime residents recognized the reclusive author, among them laughing, cheering, and beaming with pride. Over cones dripping in melted sweetness, the teens chattered about next steps. Some spoke of hosting a local reading in the library, others envisioned a real-world version of their imaginary realm at a launch party. Mr. Turner promised they would do something special to honor their success. Even as the group parted ways that night, they felt a sort of quiet enchantment that refused to fade. Long after the store closed and the neatly stacked chairs in the parlor were turned upside down on the tables, that enchantment lingered in the hush of the sleeping town. In the end, the collaborative novel was published. It reached a modest audience, delighting fantasy lovers who praised its heart, its imaginative scope, and the authenticity of its teenage perspective. But within the small circle of those who created it, the impact was immeasurable. Fiona no longer concealed her sketches or her words. She submitted her art to a school competition, something she would never have dared before. Noah's parents proudly hung one of his fantasy maps on their living room wall. Samantha joined the creative writing club, stepping up as an editor. Eric discovered an untapped passion for writing that matched his love for sports. And Tessa began drafting ideas for new storylines, eager to recapture that spark of collaboration. Mr. Turner, for his part, opened his door once a month, inviting local writing enthusiasts of all ages to come share their works in progress. His once silent house now thrummed with an ever-renewing creative energy. The living room had become more than a place. It was a beacon, reminding each person who entered that stories, like people, thrive when nurtured by a collective heart. By the time everything settled, a quiet revolution had taken place. Those teens, once unsure of themselves, had glimpsed the significance of their own voices. Nothing was more heartwarming than seeing them standing a little taller, speaking with firmer conviction, and writing with a sense of marvel. It wasn't fame or money that had changed them. It was the realization that their thoughts held power when combined with others under a shared vision. Years later, they'd look back upon that living room with profound fondness, smiling at how a group of near strangers had come together over rainy afternoons, fueled by hot chocolate and an endless supply of blank pages. Everything they'd poured into that project, every bit of vulnerability and fresh perspective, had arisen into something resonant and beautiful. The novel continued on its path, but more importantly, each of them carried forward a piece of collaborative magic, shining from within, ready to kindle wherever their separate journeys might lead.